Welcome to this series of videos on Micro Focus Content Manager, the installation and configuration overview. We previously saw an overview of the capabilities and components, and also how to install the web interfaces. In this episode, we are going to import a demonstration database provided in the software kit. This can be useful for those of you that want to evaluate the product without any effort to configure a lot of things, add the content and add the retention schedule and all these things. This one is out of the box, ready to be used. It's not obviously a production database, but it will help to look at the functionalities. It's also a good exercise to see how we can restore from a backup, an export. So for that we will connect to our SQL server. In this configuration I'm using SQL server, restore the database which is provided. Then we will connect to the workgroup server in order to register it. And finally we will connect with the desktop client to check that everything is working. All right, so let's have a look at our demonstration environment, our virtual machine that contains all this configuration. And here I have first in my software kit the demonstration database. So this is this database that we will restore, and this comes with a zip file that you just have to extract, and inside this folder you have a backup, an SQL backup, and this folder contains all the documents that are related to this data set. So I will copy this folder and put it in a better place. Usually I put it in Micro Focus Content Manager server data. That's a good place to put it. What I will also do is share this folder so that we can access it as a document store. So I'll go to Properties, Sharing, Advanced Sharing, share this folder, give it this name, DemoDB, set the permissions. I will add the administrators. In that case, because my service account is part of the administrators, if we are in a production environment, obviously we will want to make it more specific and only share for the right person, the right user service account. Okay, so now it's shared. By the way, let's test it. And that's on my server, Win02. Right, so that's working. Fine, now we are going to restore our database. This database is on the software kit, but it has to be added into our database environment, our SQL server. So we see here the other database that we created in another video, an empty database. So here we want to restore our database. It is provided as a file, so I click on Device, get here and add the file name. So let me find the right path to this file, which is in this folder. That's our file, the back file. Okay, and this will populate the restore job automatically for me with all the parameters that we need. Put it in the right default folder for databases, and I just need to click OK, and my database is restored. So we can cross-check here that we have all the tables that we're used to see in a Content Manager database. All right, so this first step is done. We have restored a database, and now we need to go into Content Manager configuration interface, which is called the Enterprise Studio. And in the list of datasets, we will add the dataset. So previously with the other one, we created the dataset, an empty one. Now we want to register a dataset. And because this dataset already exists, we have the data. We will give it the same name as in our database. That's important to have this consistency. And in this dataset provided in the software kit, you have a dataset ID, which is 45. That's important also to put the same dataset ID. We need a connection string for connecting to for the connection to SQL Server. I will generate this connection string with this little tool here that allows me to use my ODBC 17 driver, and my server is Win02. I select the database that I've created, DemoDB, test the connection, successful. Okay, we have a connection string, we are ready to go. Let's move on and keep the default for that. That's about OCR and rendering. We will see that in another time. Bulk loading, same. We will configure our document store, default document store, and that's the one that we have shared here. So let me give to this parameter the right value, which is our server DemoDB that we just shared. Becomes bold, it means it found it. Next, keep the default here, finished. We have registered our dataset. Okay, fine. So now we need, every time we change something in this interface, one thing to remember is to save and deploy. It's important so that the right configuration is distributed to all the workgroup servers. Let's try it now and connect to this new dataset with the Content Manager desktop interface. So here, when we have this form, we need to provide the dataset to register it in the client. So I will click New, put the ID of this database, which is 45, and my server, the workgroup server that hosts this dataset. By the way, you see that I can have a second workgroup server, a failover in case this one is not responding. So that's for availability. Click OK, and I get an error. So this error means that this dataset is not fully consistent. The connection to our administrator failed. We need to supply a login name that is properly set up in the database, because this database was created with another user. Okay, so for that, what we are going to do is go back to our Content Manager Enterprise Studio, go into our DemoDB, schema, manage, and it says that this dataset needs to be upgraded. So I cannot manage this dataset schema because it's not at the proper level of Content Manager. So this is something that happens specifically in this case because this demo database was created with a previous version of Content Manager, and it was not upgraded before being put in the software kit. But that's interesting to see this error, because it can happen if you restore a database from an older version of Content Manager, or sometimes when you do a migration you can use that. So here we will upgrade the database. So you saw that I right click and select upgrade. That's a process that will take a few minutes to check all the tables, check all the columns. Maybe there were new columns in the recent version of Content Manager, or some parameters have been changed and things like that. So here it was pretty quick, as we see. Let's click OK, done. And again, you remember we need to save and deploy. But here, first, I need to go back to my schema, manage, and look at this account that the client didn't find. If I look at special accounts, administrator, if I right click there and check this administrator, it gives me the same error, could not find a special location. It needs to be created. So that's exactly the error that we had previously. So here I need to right click and recreate this account so that we have the proper account to log in initially into this data set that we have imported, the administrator account, the initial account. Okay, so let's close, save, deploy, close. It restarts the service. Okay, we are now active. Let's try it again. Fine. So now it has been able to add the DemoDB dataset to the configuration of the client. I can select this DemoDB dataset. So, by the way, you see that it asks me every time I launch this client, it asks me to select the dataset. It's because I didn't choose to open the default dataset. If I click this box here, it will always go to the default one, which is the one in bold. I can change default by clicking this button here. Fine, we're in. We have now our DemoDB, which is imported. We can search for example, locations. There are many locations, people, and places. We have a file plan, which is already populated with different examples, retention schedule, security levels, and so on and so forth. Good, so we have seen that we have been able to import a database in SQL Server and register it into the Content Manager configuration. And we have finally been able to connect to this dataset with our CM client.